Hello, welcome to another episode of Idol Stand Nation. We're going to go with a different format for this week. There has been a lot of songs released, and a lot of good ones at that. Unfortunately, we ran into the problem of we ran out of talking points. So we don't want to sound like a broken record from previous episodes. So we'll put them all in the description below.
I mean, good songs, good songs. It's just we've said a lot of that. We part of it we accidentally talked about it while we were listening to it at the same time. We're like, dang, we kind of said everything while listening.
Yep. So, what we're going to go for this episode is we're going to go into a more free flow type of discussion. We all got in the back of our mind some things that we want to talk about. So, we're just going to that. We were already talking about some of these things earlier, and I think that you all would have enjoyed being a part of the conversation. So what you can do is you can just set this video up to the side while you're doing something else like homework or whatever, and just be a part of the conversation. I mean,
it's another. So this is one of our ISN talks. It's just as easy as that.
Yep, exactly. Yep. And I think what makes this type of content really great is just. Especially right now with the whole quarantine thing and whatnot, a lot of people are feeling lonely, and you can just hang out, chill with us.
It's snowing out there, okay? I hate snow. I am not going out there. It's like 6 feet, and it's still snowing right now. No, not 6 feet, 6 inches. It's 6 inches.
I wish we had snow here. Actually, we might. I haven't looked outside yet. I haven't been outside yet.
look, I can't. I don't. I've said it once, and I've said it again. I don't like the snow. Driving in it sucks.
Driving in snow is awesome. I love it.
No,
it's exciting.
It is terrifying.
You just need to switch places,
right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I'll be much happier. Absolutely. So, all right. So, Nick, earlier, what were we just talking about before we started recording?
So, what we were kind of talking about was kind of how companies, when they debut idols to, kind of take over a genre, much like Happy Face did with Dreamcatcher, where they then became the frontrunners of the rock and kind of the rock industry for idol rock. Stuff like that, how that has kind of impacted the market a little bit, maybe shifted trends, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And we kind of settled in onto that topic because we were kind of going off of other things before that kind of led up to it. Yeah. But I remember we were just saying too, like with at that time that they debuted as Minx, especially when you look at their visual aesthetics, right? You just look at them and you're like, all right, it's another girl group. What's different? Right. And Nick, how did that debut go with Minx?
Man, that debut did not go well. I mean, at the time they were debuting that, they debuted with a more innocent-esque concept. Honestly, like I don't think that was like the play. At that time. G-Friend was still in the picture as a more innocent group. They were the front runners of the group still, or of the concept still.
Both G-Friend and the Lovelies,
Lovelies as well. Yeah.
And Lovelies was more popular in Korea than they were internationally. G-Friend kind of were starting to build up that international popularity. Still being popular in Korea.
Right.
Yep.
But so. Minx kind of went under the radar. Definitely was very Nugu. I mean, they were coming from Happy Face, who had no real rapport built with the industry yet, aside from Dal Chapet. And like we were talking about a little bit before, but Dal Chapet was a front-running group, or it was supposed to be a front-running group for the next generation of idols. They were supposed to be like that really top level that up there with other groups.
Yep.
And
unfortunately, that didn't pan out the way they were expecting.
Yeah, so unfortunately, that didn't plan out the way, and that's typically that can happen, and it has a very high risk with joint company groups. Joint company groups for like Dal Chapet, and there's not really a whole lot anymore, but like Bodo Pass is one. We've talked about them before.
Yeah.
Between Wexeni and Double X, so that kind of dual company management group doesn't really happen much anymore unless usually produced through a show. A great example of that is IZ*ONE, who is managed by a dual company.
Right.
But that being said, they were on a show that was dual company kind of managed
dual
anyway.
company. Then you've got like a bunch of other companies in the pod. So
yeah. So, but aside from like produced shows or anything like that, you don't really see naturally formed dual company groups anymore, and this is because Dalshabet set a really good example for why you shouldn't do that.
Because like two of the members I forgot the name, I forgot which company it was, but two of the members that company contributed were among the more popular members of the group, and then when they split off and took those two members with them,
it definitely hit the
remaining
group.
Dalshabet they were hit pretty hard. So
I think it was E-Tribe. E-Tribe's Productions.
I don't know. You both know more about Dalshabet and Minx more than I do. I kind of came into it with Dreamcatcher, but don't get me wrong. Like it's like, I would have wanted the best for them if I did listen to them at the time. But no, like just having dual companies just right from the get-go just sounds like a bad idea, because like if one is more dependent on the other, or like if one ends up producing more again like more popular members, or like the trainees just aren't getting the same training, it could definitely hurt like the group dynamic. And because we've also seen it with kind of like IOI, where similar concept, but like as they were coming close to the end of the contract, members were starting to be almost getting ready or were already in other groups by the time the contracts ended, and that just didn't really sit well with fans, and there was like a whole mess with that as well. So
and that's another aspect as well. Like the whole what makes sense business wise may not make for the best public reception. Like a lot of people may not, a lot of fans will not like certain things that companies do that just it makes sense for them.
And I think a lot of that also stems from the fact that fans don't really understand the company aspects. They don't understand why companies do this or that, because obviously as a company they don't form as much of an emotional attachment to a group as the fans do. And so that's why, like, they don't understand when a company disbands a group. It's like because it's factually making them less money.
And bottom line, as a company, what's their purpose is to make money. I mean, if the group's not performing and they're losing money and the company dies, well, the group can't create music anymore.
And and all of that also relates to the 5-10 year plans that they look at. In the long run, do they see this group making money in the future? Do they see this group losing a ton of money in the future? All of that matters.
And that's why when you get stuff like rebranding of Minx, that was such a brilliant gamble. I mean, I won't even say maybe if it was a gamble, but more like a because like again, when I say saying gamble makes it feel like, oh, you just half-heartedly went with this idea.
I mean, not all. I'm not going to say gambling's a good thing, but I'm also not saying it's a bad thing. Gambles are chances. It's a risk. Almost anything's a risk. But like,
well, what I was trying to say was like, I don't think that they were just taking a blind risk. I think they took a deliberate, thought out risk. With rebranding. So,
and I think definitely redebuting Minx's Dreamcatcher was high risk, high reward. It's not like this was a low risk, has a chance to kind of succeed type of thing. Because as we've seen, Dreamcatcher internationally has been a huge success. I mean, like, that's just factually true. They hold a lot of brand reputation ranking, like top 10s. They are definitely prominent in that aspect. The biggest problem that I don't think Happy Face really accounted for was that rock in and of itself is not a huge factor in Korea.
Right.
Yeah.
And we've seen that play into effect with how close Dreamcatcher has gotten to number ones on music shows.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they don't have a number one, sort of, but you know, factually they don't have a number one, but they have very close number twos.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah, and I think part of that too is I remember Aura and I were talking about it after like an episode recording. You know, they have some of the worst timing when it comes to releasing.
They
like
comebacks. Like because we said and that's not definitely not the fault of the members or whatever, but it could be contracts. But like, you know, they usually come back when like bigger artists from like or more established artists such as like BTS or IU,
IS1.
Yeah.
Where they've got a huge fan base, and you know those fan bases are definitely going to vote for, you know, their favorite members. They're going to be buying the albums, and you know that's what fans do. And that's not to say that's bad, but you know, it's just unfortunate. It's an
there's also a layer of business clout that goes in with that too. So you know, Happy Face Entertainment, they're a smaller company. They may not have the same industry connections or clout to be able to forecast what, you know, SM is doing or what this other group is doing. You know, like it's because like you know a lot of the bigger companies, they do that, right? They say like, oh, well, YG, you know, Icon is coming back this week with this concept, so should we release our comeback for this week in the same week or the week, you know, in a month later? So there's a lot of forecasting projection, but you kind of need to be able to get access to that kind of information. And if you're a small company, you may not necessarily have that same access.
I mean, looking at our bingo board, just hire us. We'll forecast for you. Granted, like for the ones that we weren't kind of messing around with, and we're trying to actually be serious on our bingo board. We've hit a lot of them.
We had to handicap ourselves. That's why we put in like those stipulations of like, you know, something that's like harder, like less likely to happen, or almost impossible to happen. Like
But you know, they should just hire us to make some predictions.
But yeah, I think definitely Dreamcatcher has really bad timing. And this is actually something that you find in a lot of smaller companies, because they're not caring as much if SM is coming back. You know, they don't. It doesn't matter. What matters is getting the songs out from the group first. You know, and promoting the group and keeping their promotions active, because they know they're not going to be able to keep up promotion as long as Red Velvet or Stray Kids or any of those big groups, right? Because they're not backed by a big funder like that. But I definitely think one thing that like Happy Face, or I should say Dreamcatcher Company, because that's their actual label, could do better in that aspect is definitely looking at forecasts. So like we talked about, looking at trends, and then also adjusting. So we've seen that Dreamcatcher announces comebacks very, very early into their process,
right? And
I think part of that is the fault of the company. So if you announce slightly later, you won't actually lose as much sales, and you'll be able to change should something come up.
Oh yeah.
I mean, this isn't just with Dreamcatcher either. This is also with a lot of other groups that companies have, from like medium to smaller groups. Granted, like if they make an announcement or take too long, similar to I want to say SIS. Nick, you know this. How long did it take for SIS to release their last song before? From when you did the make start to the SIS song, like
that was a little over a year and 3 months, I think, something like that.
Yeah. So that like doing something like a make start and then having it a year out after, like, it finishes could really damage like the group too. You know, because there's already that anticipation. There's all that year long of anticipation definitely could hurt a group as well. You know,
the anticipation turns into anxiety.
Yep. Yep, and I definitely agree with that. I was very anxious that, you know, the Makestar was going to get refunded because nothing was happening. And just as the same, however, Makestar has a generally bad premonition inside of itself anyway. Because if your group is on Makestar, more than likely the company doesn't have the funds to even back you. And Makestar is kind of a place like, but in the inside of the Nugu like fandom, the people that actually follow the Nugu groups, Makestar is kind of the place where like that's your last time to buy their albums. That is your last time to see the group. And I mean, it holds shockingly true. Because even when groups get 200-300% of their funding, they still end up disbanding sooner or later. In that inside of that like timeline. A great example is SS. While they're not disbanded, they've been on Makestar 3 out of their 4 comebacks. Well, 3 out of their 4 songs. I think their debut was another debut was all right. Well, you know,
we get it.
I mean, they've been on Makestar for like a majority of their songs, and now it holds true. I mean, they haven't posted on social medias in over 100 days.
Yeah.
So that's more than likely a silent disband. However, there are a lot of groups as well from larger companies that post on Makestar as well.
Right.
And that also doesn't hold well inside of especially the international fandom, because if you're coming from a big company, why do you need backer funding?
Right.
I don't know if we need to explain what a silent disband is. I don't know, because, you know, I don't know how some people understand what silent disbands are.
So silent disbands are pretty much only prominent in the Nugu community. Bigger groups will almost never silently disband, but what a silent disband is a disbanded group, or a group that is currently active will then disband, and the company will not release any statements or anything on social media or publicly or anything. They just stop posting. Stop promoting. There's no word. You don't hear anything from the members, and eventually, like a year or two later, something will come out and be like, "Hey, we're disbanded, by the way," from one of the members.
Yeah, exactly. That's usually how that stuff breaks out, right? Is from when the former members confirms it on a show or on YouTube or something.
Yep, it's almost 100% accuracy on that. Like that a former member will say, "Hey, we're disbanded. Like we're not obviously promoting anymore."
Which is unfortunate.
To my knowledge, there's actually never been like a big group that silently disbanded. Usually the company faces pretty heavy backlash for that, but on a smaller company they don't really, because the fandom's so tiny and it's kind of expected.
Yeah, because it's almost impossible for like larger groups to silently disband, because the fandoms will, you know, that's when you go into their
chaotic
mode.
Yeah, their chaotic mode.
Start demanding and sign, petition signing and whatever. Like, we demand answers, and it just creates a bad image for a company, bad advertising for the company.
100%.
Yeah, I mean, granted, it would still be nice to be informed from a fan's perspective. You know, hey, you know, like, this is creating a lot of anxiety for my favorite group. Can we get some word? Can we get someone to talk about it? Like, just even like something, just a quick post on Instagram. Hey, you know, unfortunately, this group has unfortunately disbanded. Thank you for your support. Blah 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 blah. You know, continue supporting the members in the future. That's it.
Yep.
A quick Instagram or Twitter.
It's not hard, but typically the smaller companies don't see it as worth it, because they didn't have a fandom that was the size of Red Velvet, or they didn't have a fandom that was the size of Stray Kids, and so it's like there's no point, because we didn't have millions of fans. It's like but there's tens of thousands of fans that are still waiting for something, you know. But the company just doesn't see it that way.
You know what makes it all that much more sad too is how easy is it to just put a quick post on Twitter just to announce the disbandment, right?
Oh, it's super easy. I mean,
very, very low economy of effort, and yet they still don't even
and it's
see
literally free.
Yeah, exactly. And you still don't see that it's worth putting the time and the effort
Yep.
to draft that kind of post. I'm like, really?
Yep.
There was this one group. It was from a smaller company. I want to say in the middle of 2020 that did put an announcement that, like, you know, we've ended the contract with our members.
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
They were built with the former members of Priston, right?
I think it might have been. I don't remember. For me, I barely remember, like, we've gone through so many groups. We've talked about so many groups. It's hard to remember every group that we've talked about. But
Hinopia.
okay, so it was Hinopia. Okay, yeah, it's like giving some kind of word about it, because I don't think Hinopia even had like a big. I think there was a lot of buzz, but I don't think there was a lot of like a huge fandom. I could be.
Their fandom was basically Priston.
Yeah,
you know, Priston fandom.
Mm-hmm. Sure. But again, like, you know, having something like that just to let the fans know was incredibly nice, and also like really good to, you know, just push out any questions for. Okay, what's happening to Hinopia? What's happening to this group?
Yep.
You know.
Now,
Right.
another thing I liked about that too is that, you know, they let them know, like, they let the public know, like, hey, we let these girls know, like, hey, we don't have the resources to support you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, just to give them, we don't want to hold you back,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, we had a cordial agreement, like, yeah, that we're just gonna part ways, because. If they didn't let that part be known, you know, the public is gonna assume the worst.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everyone's gonna think like, oh, you know, they're just being greedy and an awful company, blah blah. But like, no, like, you know, I remember we distinctly talked about, oh, that's actually really cool the way they handled that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, we don't know everything behind the scenes, obviously, but, you know, it's a sense of ease, and, you know, until like one of the members says otherwise or whatever, like, you know, at that point, instead of thinking the worst, we can at least think the best kind of situation. No, giving that kind of announcement definitely puts an ease, or not, and removes the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
So, actually backtracking a little bit to when we were talking about like creating a group that's a front runner in a non already dominated section. Now that GFriend has moved on from their concept, from that like acoustic innocence concept, I'm really excited to see if a company steps in and takes that forefront, because I mean, we don't have, like, GFriend was pretty much that group that took that forefront. We have groups that have kind of stayed in that realm, or like dabbled in that realm, you know, like i.e. Lovely's, April, you know, groups that have dabbled there, but there's no front runner for that specific concept.
Yeah,
because around the same time that like, it was April, Lovely's, GFriend, they all had a very overlapping concept for around 2015, 2016 time frame. 2017 they started kind of diverging a little bit, and now it's like we've seen the recent comebacks from Lovely's in April, and even they, you know, have kind of like grown out of that pure innocent, cute concept.
Definitely.
I mean, the members are older. They're going to be more like mature as adults, you know, but like kind of touching on those subjects. So
I wouldn't be. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, even like Oh My Girl, Oh My Girl was a bit different in that they have like the ethereal, fantasy, cute, pretty kind of essence of their concept, and they probably held on to it the longest, you know, all the way up till 2019, right? with fifth season, and prior to that, they had Secret Garden. I mean, remember me happening in between that, but like, 2018, 2019, when the other groups were starting to kind of like move away from that. Oh My Girl was like one of the last to kind of hold into it, and then you had Nonstop happen. Still very cute, like very cute, very a little bit of sassy, but also very pretty. I'm really interested in seeing what Oh My Girl's going to do next. And so, who do we have as a group right now that fills it? Like, Dia, like Dia's last comeback, that throwback, way out of left field, right? Like nobody expected that, especially for an established group, a long time established group. So,
yeah, and so I wouldn't be surprised to see a bunch of like Nuku companies throw a group into that, into that field of like that acoustic, innocent, pure type of concept. I wouldn't be surprised, because the thing is now that Dreamcatcher has done it and threw a Nuku group into this random concept that nobody was in, and then made it big, the other smaller companies are going to see that and think they can do it too,
right?
And which is not wrong. They can do it. You just really have to choose your market wisely.
Yeah, because we have seen companies try and fail to create new market segments over the past like 4 or 5 years that we've been tracking this type of stuff. And
we've seen it fail with big companies, medium companies, and like it does take time, and it does take a lot of like research. And you'll with any group you release, you're also basically gambling, because it's never a guarantee.
I mean, even with like that whole like acoustic, innocent, pure type of concept, I mean, we've even seen, like Saturday, their last comeback was out of left field. Was just completely not into their normal comeback. However, that did fit that concept very well.
They put it up very well, and a part of me, you and I, we were both like, man, I want this to be a parody of that, that concept. We really wanted it because Saturday's just never been that kind of group to take itself too seriously. But then the way it turned out, I'm actually glad they did what they did. Right.
Yeah, and I think it definitely shows that Saturday has a lot of versatility, going forward. But I do want to see I would like to see a smaller, potentially Nuku group move into that concept and take that forefront, because it always expands the genre. Right. When before Dreamcatcher, right? Idol rock was really just like not prevalent, was really small. There was like 1-2 people that have done it, and now you see people. Purple Kiss came out with a rock song.
Rolling Quartz.
They're a literal band, but Rolling Quartz. So we see that since Dreamcatcher has put that like rock concept at the forefront, it has expanded the especially the Korean market to accepting a lot more of that.
Right.
Yep.
And
that kind of shows the difference between the Korean market and the international market for K-pop.
Right. Well, when it comes to Korean rock, I'm going to refer back to AOA Black. The because that was original the band concept, but that was quickly dropped.
Yep. That was one of the examples I was trying to think of when we were saying, like we were trying to say earlier, like when we've seen companies fail with trying to create a market, or establish a new one. So, because like what Nick was saying, the rock, like the idol rock thing was just, we've seen it dabbled into before, but never really take hold.
It was definitely marketed in a weird way, from what I remember, because I think they were targeting the wrong market with AOA Black. If they did it differently, it may have succeeded, but considering what's been happening with that group, it's it's definitely not gonna happen with the AOA ever.
AOA Black was with Moya. That's what actually got me into AOA in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, the really nice thing is that when a group does that, it expands the market and makes the Korean market more open. Because the thing is the international market is far more open to weird, quirky, kind of unusual concepts or something that they're not used to. Whereas the K market is very closed. You know, the K fandoms are like, this is what I like, and I want the group to stay in this concept.
Yeah, because I mean, like, you know, when you're talking about a population of 60 million people versus an international market of literally the rest of the world,
yeah,
you know, it's you just have that much more market segments, you know, in the rest of the world that's open.
But that's also why you see a lot of the times some groups are much more popular internationally than they are in their home country, versus groups that are much more popular in their home country more than internationally. And it's all depending on that market and how you recognize and look at which market you want to go for. Like now we've seen that a lot of companies are looking at the international market for success because they look at BTS, they look at Blackpink, you know, even Red Velvet and you know, the other groups that have come out of like the big four, for example, Stray Kids too.
This is a phenomenon that is not just limited to K-pop.
Right.
Or music in general.
Right.
If you look at YouTube, there's a lot of react channels from like Estonia, the UK, from Japan, Korea, all geared towards, and you know, I won't say all, but a lot of them are geared towards primarily international in general, but primarily international in general, but primarily towards the American market. And you see this come up as a topic of discussion a lot in like other like places like Reddit, right, where you say like, you know, where people are just are complaining like about just the amount of content that are geared towards American audience. And the fact of the matter is, the American audience, the American market, is just that much more open and available and rich, like compared to like other markets in the rest of the world.
Yeah,
like, there's a lot of money to be made in America.
It's a literal gold rush, except just for online content creation instead of anything else. And that is purely because Americans are much more willing to view content no matter which country, so long as it is more geared towards them and more fits whatever they're looking for. And ultimately, like on YouTube and in other forms of content creation, views mean money. So it's a pretty easy gold rush in that, and it's quite literally the same for K-pop companies. I mean, you look at SM. I mean, you look at SM, you look at JYP, all of them are gearing their groups now more for the Korean or more for the American market. I mean, just look at how much English has been put into K-pop now versus 5 years ago. You know, 2016, 2015.
And same with the musical constructs too. Like, you know, how much has the flavor of K-pop's like, you know, actual sound have changed over the past going on 3 years now, right? Yeah. Coming from 2018, late 2018, coming to now.
I mean,
how much has it changed to be closer to like in line with what's going on in the American music scene?
Right. Yeah. Something that you know, with them kind of expanding into more markets, something that they, you know, that they should probably be also considering is, you know, possibly also having more international, like, international people. Like, they should hire more international people because, you know, there's been, you know, some controversies that have happened with groups that
cultural insensitivities.
Cultural insensitivities, exactly, or cultural appropriation. You know, it's people who understand or who have lived in other cultures, possibly as a, I want to say informant, but that is definitely the wrong word.
Advisor?
Advisor.
As a cultural advisor?
Yeah, cultural advisor. Because, you know, having someone who is living in, who, you know, only studies it through a book as a cultural advisor won't be as important as someone who actually has been living.
Actually lived it.
Yeah, exactly. Lived in the country, who has experienced it. You know, there's been so many issues about that. So having someone being able to speak upon it, who's lived it, could definitely help improve and limit like international backlash, and could also potentially like improve relations in those markets.
Yep.
And this is something that, you know, has been brought up by other like content creators that I've seen on like TikTok, YouTube, and stuff like that. And those are actually valid points, you know.
One thing I also have noticed is that almost no matter what genre is prevalent at the time, because K-pop, you know, coming from the top 1%, we understand this, but the average listener would not understand this, is K-pop, the season will determine the primary genre. Almost 100% of the time. But however, that's also something that I find very interesting, because even when we went through the girl crush phase, I guess you could call it.
Yeah. I knew you were going to go in that direction.
Yeah. So even when we went through the girl crush phase, when winter came along, it was slower. It was still girl crush, but it was tuned down. It wasn't as crashy, you know. And I find that interesting that the season still has an effect, even when there's such a dominant like concept like that. Like when we went through girl crush 2018
somewhere around there.
Yeah.
20,
like
late
2018
going into 2019, the first half of 2019.
Like K-pop or like girl crush was dominant, and by dominant I mean everyone was doing it. That's all you heard. It was only girl crush.
I mean,
there was like you had Lovelyz and Oh My Girl released 2 songs that were like not girl crush, and like they were fairly successul because like they were not girl crush.
It was the people that were tired of girl crush.
I mean, if you also look at like the recent years, it's been this recent like past year, it's been like heavy disco, heavy funk kind of deal. But then
kind of going on with because that's also kind of going in line with what's popular in America as well. Because like I only just heard about them, but apparently they're pretty popular. The Weeknd. Right, with their retro throwback style. One of my coworkers is like totally, well, 2 of my coworkers are like totally in love with me, so why I know about them.
But America has been going through a new disco phase. And new disco is actually a thing that was primarily came from like electronica subsets and stuff like that. And that definitely has an influence as well. I mean, we just saw G-Friend do it with Mago. You know, obviously BTS is Dynamite, right? And then even Everglow with La Di Da, like they have been we have been moving towards that direction, because the American, like we just talked about, the American market almost controls the K-pop companies at this point.
But at the
because
same,
they want that American money.
But at the same time, like winter's here, we've hit that like with artists such as Han Dong-gun, more of a ballad kind of music once the winter hits, it becomes so much more prevalent. I think in the last couple of weeks, more than half of our musical choices have been ballads,
or something like more like R&B, something generally like down tempo. So get this, right? You said before we were talking about how like with Minx being rebranded into Dreamcatcher to create a new market or because they saw an opportunity there, they took it. Well, we also saw SM do the same thing with the season, right? With
Espa,
with Red Velvet's Cycle.
Talking
about 2019.
2019 winter. I'm thinking. So, I'm still in like this past comeback.
So because at that time, right, 2019 winter, everybody was doing ballads. We were all getting burnt out on it. We were talking about it, we were complaining about it, and then here comes Red Velvet with Psycho, and what do they do? They pull off a perfect all-kill, right? Was it perfect all-kill?
Yeah, with the up-tempo R&B feel.
Because everybody was just all for it. Like, hey, look, it's not a ballad song.
But yeah, and like Aura was saying, this is when ballad singers really like come out. This is when like they'll write songs throughout the year, maybe release 1 or 2 to keep their name prevalent, and then just release a slew of music throughout the winter.
Right.
And I mean, it is no shocker to me to see like a ton of recommendations of ballads pop up on my winter like feed.
Yeah.
Because of that whole like slew of music that they're releasing. I mean, we've seen Han Dong-gun a lot recently. Yang Da-il.
Yeah.
You know, we've seen, and I'm sure going into especially this month, because this month is usually the you know, going into this month and going into next month is usually the end of it. So that's when, if you have songs left, you release the songs. You know, you get them through.
Yeah. There's also been like a lot of down-tempo rock songs as well, like beautifully done. You know, heavy into like slow guitars, piano, whatever.
Almost like a soft rock, light rock.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, we've even seen, again, comebacks from idol groups being ballads like aespa,
Alexa,
Purple Kiss, Alexa, Saturday yet again. So like we've even seen like idol groups, and that is no shocker for winter. If you are someone that has been following K-pop for multiple years, you will know that come like December, come like around Christmas time, starts the ballad season, and that's when OSTs come out.
Bro,
we've gotten a lot of that.
Yeah. OSTs are a big part, and that's because OSTs have a lot of ballads. You know, they're slower because you don't want to listen to a heavy rock song in an OST. It's not gonna make a whole lot of sense. So ballads work the best there. That's also like we talked about, when you see the R&B artists come back, and when you see even like slower rap artists, so like Ash Island, you know, people like that come back as well.
Or they do like Ash Island will do like mashups with like Haze or Heartfelt.
Yeah. And so that is a perfect time for these artists to come back. It's almost like it's their season, because when summer comes around, you know, those artists will, in reality, are kind of a small part of the fandoms. You know, they don't really have a huge following. You know, they don't want to compete with Red Velvet or Stray Kids or BTS. You know,
everyone else is like releasing just like fire, releasing all kinds of fire throughout the summer.
Yeah, like
summer
you
bangers.
know, for example, Han Dong-gun isn't gonna release a ballad in the same week that Stray Kids releases a fire mixtape. Like, that's not gonna happen. You know, it's not, because it's not gonna trend well for him.
Or, you know, he can release it just with knowing that he can't expect much traction out of it. Just like,
right.
I'm gonna release a summer ballad, you know, a youthful summer ballad. I know it's not gonna get a lot of views because, you know, Stray Kids or, you know, whatever JYP got going on. So.
Yeah. What I do find interesting is that this winter we have had a lot of almost refreshing, uplifting songs.
Yeah,
I mean, considering what's been happening in the world, I don't blame that. I think, you know, trying to give hope to like a situation such as this is having that kind of like hopeful feel to ballads. It has kind of helped people's mental health, and that's something that's also been on the up and up. And why did I say the up and up? That just makes me sound old.
Well, you are.
But it's so definitely been trying to make people feel a bit better over there.
So you know, I like to study history. I follow a lot of history. I have various sub genres of history, but you know, I do also follow a little bit of like cultural history in terms of like music and film. And one thing that is also very useful about having like this large like kind of repository of film and music that's been released over the past 100 years is it movies and TV shows, books, music, and all that, they all reflect the social values and also the social concerns of the period that they were written. So, you know, you go 50 years from now, people can, you know, look back at the movies and the songs that are written during this era and just like really get a feel for like, how did we as a society like really feel? Like what was going on in our heads? What was going on in our hearts? So, and, you know, that goes back to like what you were saying earlier with like yeah, because everything that's been going on in the world with the pandemic and whatnot, it's driving a lot of what we see going on in movies, music, television. So. And for a lot of people, what's the meme? People, the meme of like looking back to this period, like, oh, Grandpa, so what was that pandemic like? Back in the day, and just seeing like the PTSD Vietnam era images. Yeah.
Everybody, gather your toilet paper. Gather toilet paper.
Yep. So, what was another one that we were talking about prior to? We were talking about music, like what the industry needs.
Yeah.
So, or you already kind of touched on that with like the cultural sensitivities and whatnot. What else did you? There was another one that you had, right? Besides like and mental health.
The mental health thing. It's something that we've talked about before, and a bunch of other like people have talked about before. With the concerns of mental health. Like, granted, we're seeing idols taking more breaks for mental health, physical health issues, which like are great things, and that it's being taken more seriously. But we're still seeing like problems of like going on, and it's trying to create like something to help support the industry. What does the industry need to help support it? What do companies need? Like, again, like with the cultural thing, there are definitely some cultural insensitivities that happen because it's hard to know everything in every country, hard to know like what's offensive to every single person. There's just
and there's also the contradictory aspect as well, as like what's offensive here in this country is acceptable in that country. What's acceptable in that country is going to be offensive to that
exactly
country. So
it's trying to find a good.
You're never going to make everybody happy,
right? But it's also trying to find a good middle ground and trying to have like someone there to kind of alleviate it, to at least be informative.
Another part too is it's not just on the companies themselves. It's also on the people receiving the message or consuming the media, because when you if say for example we release something, we collectively, right, we make a song that is that pulls from say like Russian culture, right, and not appropriating but like celebrating their aspects of culture, promoting that culture and whatnot. And we release it in that context, but there's some imagery in there that is offensive to people in Brazil.
Right.
Well, for one, the message and the whole concept was not tailored to the people in Brazil. We acknowledge that is offensive to your society, but that wasn't our intent. Our intent was to celebrate this other country's culture, right? It was tailored towards that. So, is it really fair to you blasting us for being offensive to your culture?
It's
on that aspect.
I think it's more dependent on like how
the context,
the context, and also like how much is it being tailored? Is it like is like if like in general if we're more tailored to trying to tailor like our group, our music to a worldwide market, yes, you have to try to tailor to as many and like markets and cultures as possible if you're trying to go for worldwide. But if you're more specific to like just one market, like very niche, very small, like it's a little bit more understandable. But then there's also like
so how about this then, for example, so in Eastern Asian cultures, right, there's a symbol that looks very similar to the Nazi swastika, right? Except it's pointing in the opposite direction. And a lot of Western tourists will go to Japan, will go to China or Korea, see those symbols, and get highly offended. And again, that wasn't the intent. The intent is not to promote
Right.
That,
it was
ideology.
And the symbol was originally very much a religious symbol, which
and which the same symbol also exists in Catholicism.
Mm-hmm.
So again, in that context, that is you're not trying to promote Nazi ideology,
right?
So is it fair to blast these temples for having that symbol that they've already had for thousands of years? That's what I'm talking about.
The thing that ultimately comes down to idol groups, content creators, anyone,
mm-hmm.
right, that has a fandom and is known by multiple people, what ultimately comes down is that nothing is fair. Nothing is fair to them, and
mm-hmm.
nothing will ever be fair to them.
Right.
I mean, look at idol groups, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you look back 5 years, idol groups were not seen by anyone as human beings.
Mm-hmm.
I mean anyone. Their fandom saw them as a person, well, sort of a person.
As a character, as a persona.
Yeah, as a persona that was invincible, right? And that's what they were perceived as.
And
and then they went back to their company, and their company said, "You're a product."
Yep.
Right.
And even now with mental health stuff, like companies that still have mental health, like professionals and stuff in their companies, they do recognize that their idols are human,
mm-hmm.
but they also recognize that their idols are still a product,
right?
Yep.
And they have to sell that product,
mm-hmm.
and the buyers of that product are the fandoms, but the problem as well is that the fandoms haven't changed that thing. They still think these idols are these almost inhuman type of people that don't make mistakes, that live a perfect life,
mm-hmm.
that have no problems, and that's just factually not true.
Right. They experience power.
You see a lot of the same mentality of like internet commenters, right? You see people who post comments on the news article or on the YouTube video. The kind of going back into that same, it's kind of in that same kind of general vicinity of like cyberbullying, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's so easy for some Joe Schmo to post some comment about somebody online that they don't personally know because they don't see them as a person, and they have the shield of anonymity, they're hiding behind a username online. And
the thing about it is, right, is that since the viewers only see what you project, right? Mm-hmm. The viewers only see stage performances and edited vlogs and the stuff that they show, right? The viewers will not assume that those people, that they'll just have to assume that those people live that way all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just like maybe our viewers, right? They only see what we show them.
Yep.
So realistically, behind the scenes, they have no idea what we're talking about. If we're arguing, we never do. But if we're arguing,
no, they always call me old. Anyways,
hands, I mean, you are old. But if we're but realistically, if we're throwing hands or what's up,
mm-hmm.
And the only thing they have to say is if something comes up, we're just like, yes, that happened, or yes, no, that didn't happen. That's really only the confrontation that they have to that. And so in that way, I understand that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
but however, you have to understand that first and foremost, that these people are human.
Yeah.
That they all have rough spots in their lives.
And it's hard to know everything. It's definitely hard to know everything.
Oh yeah. Yeah, because you need all that to put everything in a proper context.
Mm-hmm.
Now, going back to what you're talking about too, like with a lot of companies seeing their idols as products to promote. That's not just a problem in the K-pop industry. It's a wider, far-reaching problem across all industries. Because
mm-hmm.
You look at and not just in Korea, but also in America, in the UK, you name it, of companies that treat their workers like that they wish that their workers were just robots, mindless robots that just do what they're told, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That they didn't have to take a break and they could work all day, every day, work 24 hours a day, right? You see that a lot in like all these forums, right? For like people who work in programming, coding, or financial markets or whatnot.
Yeah, and a big one as well is game development and in esports.
That was gonna be the next one I was gonna bring up because Aura, you kind of had a hand in that, right?
I was a quality assurance tester. And yeah, we worked a lot of hours, try to make sure everything was good. There's a lot of stuff I'm not allowed to say, but
Can you say if you got a lot of like after hours calls? Like, hey, I know it's beyond your shift time, but like I need you to like, work on this, or okay.
No.
So you at least had that, because there are other companies,
right?
And especially in the
I've worked a bunch of other jobs that because it's not just with gaming company, it's with like retail too. It's like, hey, can you come in? Retail fast food. It's like, hey, can you come in? I know it's your day off, but can you come in? We could really use your help. Stuff like that. It's
same with myself.
Yeah.
We've all been there.
Yep, and even myself as an esports coach, right? Because that is before I opted to retire, that was my primary source of income. And even with that, I mean, like I was expected to be able to coach 8 to 10 hours a day. Afterwards, I would need 4 hours of analyzing and strategizing. Then I would need to create a lesson plan for the next day. Make sure I'm up to date with their manager. And then, so I'm doing all of these things. And at that point, for one team, I'm end up working 18 hours a day. And I'm just like, what's happening? And I mean, I'm working for an hourly wage just like everyone else, but like the problem is that that's almost expected. There are esports contracts that literally permit you from having a girlfriend or anything, because it can distract you from what you're doing, and stuff like that is the unfortunate part of that side of esports, is that there is no union. There is no standardization for contracts, and so it's the companies can kind of scalp the players a little bit.
And there's no real labor laws for that kind of stuff either, right?
No, because it's not technically.
It's not like a real not seen as like a real job.
It's not a recognized form of employment.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you sign a contract, that is a recognized form of employment. You are a contracted employer or an employee, but you're not like. Being an esports professional is not seen as like a form of employment. Yeah. And it's very much the same way with idol groups. There's no standardization. The only standardization we have inside of idols is you can sign for a maximum of 7 years. Yeah. And the only reason that is because of the slave contracts before that, with idol groups signing for 13 years or
especially after the era of HOT.
Yeah, the HOT area was like the worst that it ever got.
I mean, like, I know that the Korean legislation is trying to change, for like trainees. I think
various entertainer laws. They've got a bunch in the books. So.
Yeah, and they're trying to change stuff for mental health as well. And all of that is progressing towards this, like, idols being an actual form of employment versus idols being looked at as like, why are you doing this?
Yeah, because there used to be a lot of parents that didn't look at this at it as a job, right? And they would honestly discourage idols from being idols, because being an idol is honestly, even now, it's a huge risk of a position, because you're giving up huge portions of your life. You're giving up your childhood. You're giving up your teenage years to be a trainee. You don't get to experience childhood. And
on top of that, it's not even a guarantee that you'll debut.
Yeah, guarantee you'll debut.
Companies will come to you saying, "Hey, I really like what you got. You look great. You could be the next CL Taeyeon. You could be the next, you could be the next Rain. You could be the next JYP. You could do this or that." And the problem is that while yes, you could be, you could also be the next, Nugu girl. Or Nugu boy. You could be you could be in one of those small groups and never be known.
And then also the flexibility of the skills of your primary skills that you learn, right? Like, okay, I learned how to sing, I learned how to dance, and my career as an idol, a performer, didn't pan out. So what am I going to do with these skills now?
Yeah, you only have a few options through that. I mean, you could be a vocal coach, provided you're good at coaching, because that's also a skill.
Yeah, because we've talked about that before too.
Yeah, there's not. It takes a certain type of person to be able to teach stuff like that, you know. But I mean, a backup dancer.
Yeah.
Yep. You know, and even that, backup dancers don't make great money. If you look good enough, you could be an actress or actor
or a model
or a model.
So like, you know, the secondary and tertiary skills that you pick up from it, like, you know, building up the self-confidence and the stage presence, though, you know, that stuff is useful no matter where, you know, like it's great for sales, it's great as a CEO, it's great as whatever careers out there, you know, that stuff is valuable no matter where. But like the primary skills, like you're gonna feel like you've lost a lot of your time, and that is very damaging to your self-confidence as well.
I mean, that's something that we've talked about before, that, you know, before or after recordings, is like, hey, you know, like what else could companies do to help support groups like this, you know, help them, like the industry could help like trainees, you know, build up other skills, like mathematical skills, business skills, I don't know, even
I mean, so
as trainee skills too.
We've talked about that before, like, you know, if we ran our own company, that was something that I also have brought up as well. Is like, yeah, you know, it's kind of like, you know, in college where you have a major and you have a minor. Or like if we had our own company, I would like for our, you know, trainees to also have kind of like a minor where it's like, you know, it can be like a what's it called, a makeup artist, right? Or fashion coordinator. You know, those type of like other skills still relevant to the entertainment industry. You know, that way you have a post career if you know, you retire from being an idol or whatever, or, you know, another career, just move on over to you. Just decide you don't want to be an idol. So giving the trainees that kind of flexibility, career life flexibility.
Because like even with idols, like nowadays, you know, it's hard to think of them outside of the idol bubble, you know, like where could they go to next, you know, what would they be doing after. There's a lot of like uncertainty, you know. You want, as fans of idols, you know, you want to see them succeed. You want to see them, like, even if they're not an idol anymore, you want to see them succeed somewhere else. You don't want them to just completely fail and not have anything in the future, because not every idol is going to have the skills to continue to be an actress, not to have all the skills to be, I don't know, a CEO of their own company. But you know, you want to there are a lot of things that could be done to provide a lot more support, you know.
Yep, for sure. Like
culturally, emotionally, and just backup. But yeah.
So gentlemen, we've already hit an hour of discussion. So I was gonna say, like, Aura, you know, Aura and Nick have a couple last words. So Aura, looks like you already shot your shot. So Nick, you have a couple of things you want to say before we wrap it up?
No, I think I'm pretty alright, actually. I think we pretty much covered all the bases, you know. Yep. And it was definitely a great free flowing discussion that we had here.
Yeah,
so
for sure. Yeah, I would say for myself, you know, for you, the listeners, if there was anything, if you got your own thoughts as well to any one of the dozens of topics we covered in this discussion, by all means, you know, post your comments below. You know, add to the discussion. You know, add some of your viewpoints 100%. For us to consider. And that's all I got to say.
All right. Well, thank you for watching. This has been ISN Nation. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. Click that bell icon if you want to know when we upload in the future. All our socials will be in the links down below, as well as maybe some MVs that, you know, you should check out. And we will see you guys next week.
Bye.